Hello. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte. I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello.
And in today's episode, we are going to talk about the emotions that we finally start dealing with as we settle into the hospital after our son Aiden was admitted for AML. And how we started to get acclimated to that.
Right. And I think throughout this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what our new normal is. And, with a lot of emotions going on within this first week, we come to the realization after the doctors had told us that, this isn't a 1 or 2 week procedure that Aiden is scheduled to have. He's scheduled to have, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe it's 5 or 6 weeks of intense chemotherapy. And then after the chemotherapy, so he'll be in the hospital those 5 or 6 weeks. And then after the chemo, he has to recover. His labs have to reach a certain number before he would be able to take a 1 week hiatus at home under massive restrictions. Mm-hmm. But he could be home and take about a week. We would do everything in our power to stretch it to a week and 1 day or a week and 2 days.
As many days as we could get out of it.
As many days as we could, exactly. Mm-hmm. And he would then go back into the hospital and repeat that same procedure. So again, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, this was so many years ago. I don't know. Maybe when we get into more of the documentation of actually what was going on, but it almost seemed like they were ramping it up, right? Starting him out maybe a little lighter intensive chemotherapy and then kind of ramping it up at the end. But it was pretty consistent throughout. 5 weeks, 6 weeks, recovery period in the hospital, reach certain goals, that we put on a visual board so we could all see how close we were to getting home, go home for a week, then come back. So we not only had to work within those parameters, we had to adjust our lives. And because one of us was always going to be with Aiden 24/7.
Right. And we will share as we get through more months of these journals, but the treatments were different every time because AML is so challenging to beat. And so they would use different combinations of the drugs. And I remember one of the nurse practitioner that was with us pretty much the whole entire time explained it to me as, they're not just, she explained it like mowing the grass, but you're not just mowing the grass, you're like mowing down into the dirt and digging down into the dirt and getting all the roots. Like that's what they're trying to do with these medications. So it was intense. And the reason, like in the last episode when we were talking about being in such shock, it's because that's the news that we heard. You're going to be here for 5, 6, 7 weeks. He's not leaving. Let you go home for about a week, and then repeat. So that was just, when we're talking about getting acclimated and figuring things out, that just...
Yeah, very difficult to try to do that when you are still in shock from, a week earlier, right? At this point where we are in the story, a week earlier we were, just living normal lives. And now we have split turned 180 degrees to this life. And how are we going to work through that? And we talked a little bit on the last episode that Kim was on summer break, but getting ready to start school. Carly was ready to start school. I was still working and had to ask if I could work at the hospital because someone needed to be there all the time. And we were literally there 24/7 all the time.
Yes. So I am going to share a journal entry from day 5. And this is, August 21st, 2010. Aiden had more stomach pain today. early on, but we were able to get him some relief by late afternoon. So this is the following day after he had been up for 20 hours, and then had gotten his first chemo treatment. So he was able to get the pain did go away, and he got some sleep. He ran a fever today because of the chemo, but it went away, and the medicine for nausea seems to be helping him. Carlos and I are learning how to tag team the doctors and nurses. I go get them. He focuses on what the problem of the moment is and what the solution will be. The second part is what we've been having a hard time with. I also have all of the documentation to answer any questions. Keeping a journal has been very helpful to go back and look up dates when he was sick, etc. Aiden hasn't been awake enough to really talk to him about how he's feeling. It is pretty obvious about how he feels about the whole thing. But I think I was able to reassure him a little today. I will take away any pain I can from that kid. So I remember this day exactly, being there with him. I believe it was just him and I at this point. Carlos had to, I'm going to continue the journal in a second. He had to make a trip back, but I sat down with Aiden and just looked him in the eyes and said, this doesn't mean you're going to die. The doctors are giving you medicine. We are going to fight this. We're going to be able to make it go away. You know, just being that blunt with him. I literally told him if I could do it for him, I would trade places with him. It was that kind of conversation because it was at this point, you know, we're a few days in and our emotions are just starting to come out now. I think a little bit of the shock's wearing off. And
yeah, but Aiden's not, you know, he doesn't express his feelings and emotions.
No.
So we don't even know how he's feeling at this time. So
No.
we almost feel compelled on occasion to be like, you know, we understand that you may be scared or upset or nervous. We're trying to pinpoint his emotions because he's really not giving us a lot of
no,
that.
he wasn't going to share anything. We had to come to him with questions and probe and try to get things out of him. And if not, just communicate to him. Okay, so then I'm continuing on. Carlos made a trip back to our house today. Thanks to our parents for cleaning and keeping up with things. He needed to get some things in order and then bring some things back. I am planning on heading back with Carly tomorrow to do some school shopping for her. I told you I was the last minute queen, and then tried to stay in town for a while so I can be at work, fill out some paperwork, and get work stuff in order. So far, none of our plans have worked out as far as taking turns here because Aiden has needed both of us here. Thanks, and I just thanked everyone for their kind comments, thoughts, prayers, and support. Because on this Caring Bridge site, you know, it was two-way communication. People could leave comments, so that was awesome for us to be able to see.
Well, just a couple, if I could pick up on a couple
Yes.
of that, because you talked about the tag team a little bit. And with all love, Kim is very reactive. You know, you can't spring news on her without her maybe getting a little triggered or...
Well, I've gotten a lot better, but that brought a lot of that. Whatever you dealt with during going through something like this is going to be heightened.
So knowing that, you know, she would bring that feeling and emotion and, you know, to a conversation because, you know, you really couldn't damp it down because we were going through a major life event, a life and death event. It was hard for her to damp that down. So when we talk about tag team, Kim would go out, maybe get a nurse or a doctor.
Because that wasn't easy either. So I kind of knew that system of like who to ask for and where to find them and how to get them. Because literally sometimes it involved like hunting them down.
Literally.
Knowing the right things to say and things like that. So that was kind of my strength. So I handled that part of it. Then when they would finally come to the room, you would handle the communicating part.
Right. So I would, I could, speak her in a little softer tone, maybe not, with a bunch of anxiety, because Aiden didn't like that either, right? He didn't like, heightened excitement inside the room. So,
Sure.
We would speak softly, we would talk about it. And at that point, Kim could challenge either the diagnosis or, what they were saying. Again, and I hate to say this as, we weren't getting great care. I believe we were, but, and sometimes, sometimes folks would come to the room and we'd be like, wow, Aiden's really not feeling well with this medicine, and be like, well, oh, that's typical. And
then try to leave. And we're like, wait,
yeah,
you can't leave.
And not only that, but, say, well, hey, that's typical. But like, well, the first 3 times we gave that to him, he didn't have that reaction. So is that typical, or is there something else that we should be looking
True.
at? So again, anytime we heard typical or unique, it really raised our radar, because it almost felt like a dismissive term. So we really were on heightened alert when we heard those 2 words. But then, so through all this, having these conversations, trying to work with Aiden's care, getting the verbiage and the language to do that, we also had to set up whatever this next 10 months to a year was going to look like. How are we going to rotate in a way to make sure that someone was with Aiden all the time, which meant Kim and I would almost never be together, because either
Yes.
she was there or I was there. We would never be together. So we had to figure that out. We also had to figure out the mundane things like, how do you get a parking pass, and where do we park, and how do we get in the building, and where do we eat? Because we're not making home cooked meals anymore. We're
Right.
eating at, the hospital.
And when, it mentioned, like, thanks to our parents for cleaning up, like, just things back at home that needed to be, the trash still has to go out, or where's Carly going to stay, and what things. So, having our family that was there to do those kinds of things for us was amazing. We had these plans like, oh, well, we have this schedule and you'll be here these many days and I'll be there these other days. No, that went out the window like from day one. It took us a while. We planned it. We thought we were going to do that, but that didn't happen for like these first 5 days or so. We were both at the hospital most of the time, but we would leave, like I might go home, for a few hours because I have to go do this, or he might go home. When we showed up there at the emergency room, we didn't know it was going to be 5, 6, 7 weeks staying in the hospital. So we didn't have those kinds of things with us. So it was constantly, oh, we need this. Oh, well, we didn't bring that. So doing those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of adjusting.
We didn't
at
even
first.
pack toiletries. We didn't bring change of clothes. We didn't know.
Right.
So all that had to happen. So with us trying to figure out how to, handle, just all the side stuff, there was a lot of emotions going on at the same time. We're living in a new place. We are around people we don't know. We are having invasive procedures.
Seeing things. There were babies on the floor. All of that was shocking. The IV poles, the little kids running around, because you could see into the rooms if their doors are open. Because again, a lot of us are living there. So
Yeah, I remember, I think I told you one of the very first days, we walked by, we went to our room. We're actually at the very end of the hall, which was our first room. But, we walked by a few rooms, and there was one room where there was this mother holding her baby to her chest, and she was just rocking back and forth. And the baby was uncomfortable and crying and, very hard to soothe. But she was literally laying on the bed, rocking back and forth with this baby.
But for days, every time we walked past that room, she was sitting up rocking the baby. Like, it just was every time we walked past. I mean, it was things like that that hit you and touch you.
And those
you remember.
And those are the people that we end up communicating with, us having a similar struggle. But those are people we ended up, talking with, having adult conversations, trying to escape a little bit of the, the world that we live in, but still have a connection. How are you doing? How are you doing? Kind of being a support network for all of us. But being in that environment made us realize where we're at and what we're doing. Right.
And so, we start to get things figured out a little bit, and that's where the emotions and things are now starting to come out. So this next journal entry is actually Carlos's, but I'm going to be the reader. And he wrote, Aiden is just now falling asleep for the evening. We had a really nice father-son day. Tonight, Aiden asked me all about my job, what I do on a daily basis, and he asked me about work and the parts we manufacture. He never really asked me what I do for a living before, so this was nice. Aiden tries to play it cool when people are around, and he does not talk much when visitors are here. He likes the visits, but only for about 10 minutes. Then he starts giving me the eyes. So either I have to leave the room and take the visitor with me, or Aiden will leave the room himself. I told Aiden that I liked reading the Caring Bridge messages to him and that I liked writing down what we did together each day. Inspired, Aiden started his own journal today. Here is his first entry, August 24th, 2010. And he literally just writes, 1, woke up. 2, had a bagel. 3, took pills and vomited. 4, played. 5, eat cheeseburger. 6, tried cheesecake. 7, went to game room. 8, came back and wrote in journal. 9, watched TV. And 10, went to sleep. Inside the front cover of his journal, it says, Aiden's Cancer Journal. Then it has a guest list that both he and I signed. When I signed the book, I started to cry for the first time. This is Carlos. It really hit me that Aiden has cancer. To see the word cancer in Aiden's handwriting just killed me. I can't believe this. My son, my amazing son, has cancer.
That still gets me now.
And that is how those feelings came out. He wasn't expecting that, He was trying to get Aiden to write and try to share some things, and
Yeah, that whole situation. Aiden and I, really spent a lot of time just talking about things that maybe we should have talked about for years before. He was never really that kind of kid. Wasn't inquisitive about what I did at work. He was more, I want to play with my friends. I want to, do what I enjoy doing. And, that was his central focus. And he was very focused kid. If he wanted to do something, he would, beeline to that and stay on that track as much as possible. But we actually had some really good late night conversations. I think some people that we'll bring up a little bit later on is we started making connections and friends with some folks either that work there or who were also admitted that we could have some good conversations with as well. And, Aiden and I would go out and have, our social hour with those people, that we could talk to. So it was really the first time that we actually started to have a lot of good conversations not just surface ones like, hey, what are we doing today, or where are we going, or all this stuff. It was deeper conversations, which was really neat. And I think you probably did the same thing with Carly, right? I mean, you guys probably had a little bit more of a connection because you were spending a lot more time with her during this time.
Yeah. So, Carlos ended up being at the hospital more alone with Aiden during this time. And Carly and I ended up being back at home more. And it was torturous. And I didn't know all these things. He was finding out and going through, and he had no idea, how we were feeling and what we were, the little we told each other or when we had time to talk. But Carly and I were kind of like, we felt bad. Like it was kind of an anger almost, like, because we didn't want to be trying to function normally. Like I took her school shopping. I felt guilty for being in a store. She felt awkward. Like, what are we doing? But we had to do it, but we both wanted to be at the hospital. So I had to have a lot of conversations with Carly about, the good of, we have to continue on. We have to keep, trying to live life as much as possible, that going to school would be a good distraction for her. Also promising, that we'll get you up there to visit. We're going to be able to go to the hospital and have our times to visit. So a lot of reassuring. She also wanted to be in the loop of knowing what was going on and, making sure we were filling her in. So there was a lot of that going on.
And during that time, we all had the realization, this is what we're going to be doing, right? So it wasn't, oh, this might go away, or it's another misdiagnosis, right?
Right, no.
We were in it. This was actually happening. So I think once we had that realization and we started planning around that, little things really started to annoy each other. Little things really started to come in that, we just didn't really need. I think one example is, Aiden, who's a very picky eater, and we can get into that maybe a little bit more, but to set that up, Aiden only ate probably 5 different foods.
Right.
If that.
Very picky.
Very picky.
It wasn't just pickiness. Like, that was all he would eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was more than, just that.
Right. So he would, his, he didn't have a lot of things where that he would want to choose from. So his menu was very limited. So I think at one point I had introduced him to cheesecake, right? So I make this decision on my own. I'm with Aiden. We're just kind of doing what we can, right?
Because he also wouldn't try things.
Oh, no.
He wasn't like, oh, I'll try anything, but I only like these. No, he wouldn't try things.
And it was both things too, right? Sometimes he didn't like the taste. Maybe he liked the taste but didn't like the texture.
Right.
Or maybe he liked the taste and texture but didn't like the smell. So it could be any number of things. So to find that perfect food, if cheesecake's a perfect food, but
it's mine.
Yeah.
My perfect food.
But to find something else that he would eat that was offered, at the hospital is, we were lucky, it was something else for him to try. So, I, gave him some cheesecake. We were going to do like a pastry social, which was kind of a big thing later on that we did, but this was kind of the start of it. Kim got word of that, and why are we doing cheesecake? That's not a diet that we should be,
I think I was still worried about I was traumatized from the night of 20 hours sitting on the edge of the bed because he ate too much. So I was, worried about those kinds of things.
Yeah. And, but, so we started having some of those discussions in front of Aiden, and he's like, hey, time out. We can't be having that in the room, right? But everything is such a whirlwind at this point. We're just,
heightened emotions, the deep emotions finally starting to come out.
Right.
Yeah, trying to stay focused on keeping things calm for Aiden. So it was challenging.
So I think, at this point, we've, finally started to understand a little bit of the schedule. It was still kind of topsy-turvy the first week, but we knew how we were going to kind of move forward once school started, right? We knew that, I would be there during the week and would be there on the weekends. Carly would come with us when we did the exchanges so she could visit her brother. Aiden and I started getting into a little bit of a routine where we were kind of doing journal entries. We were reading Caring Bridges. We were setting up the room. I mean, one of the times I went home, I grabbed his old football jersey. I brought it with me back. I brought a lot of my files and folders and stuff for work. So I could kind of set up a little office up there so I could work while I was there. So
you were really good at making things a game or just fun. So like the first routine he started setting up was the journal. Like, hey, every night before we go to sleep, we're going to make a list, of what we did today. So he did that. Doing the socials, right? So it was the cafeteria desserts, right? It was like whatever they had down it. That's why we're like, ooh, cheesecake. No, it was the cafeteria cheesecake,
Yeah.
So it was, whatever they had down there, but it's going to be a dessert social. And,
Right.
So, I mean, that I got to give it to you because I was not in that frame of mind at that point. So he did really good with that.
Well, and I started to learn that would keep Aiden's mind off of some of the bad stuff that was going on. They also had a child life specialist that we'll probably get into a little bit more, but they were trying to build a routine, and Aiden was a little standoffish with that, because he wanted to do things specifically his way and at his time frame and all that. So, I would have to kind of interject a lot there to try to make it fun, and we would set up tournaments and, all that stuff still to come. But I think what we established was because it was going to be Aiden and I the majority of the time, especially when a lot of the normal doctors throughout the week would be there during the week, we kind of set up the room to fit our personality, right? So, we kind of set it up that we felt like anybody entering here was entering kind of, our piece of home and what our piece of home would look like. So I think I have a journal entry. I typically, Kimberly, do not like to read these. So I'd rather she read them, but I'm going to attempt this one because this really put into perspective for me everything that we were going through. So this was, I don't know the date, probably around August 25th of 2010. And after updating our journals last night, Aiden and I stayed up late and talked, which we typically did. The doctors and nurses called our room the man cave because we had video games, football jerseys, and UFC playing on the TV. We tried to act tough, but every once in a while the situation gets the best of us. A couple days ago was me breaking down after I saw Aiden's journal, and last night it was Aiden's turn. It might get me.
It's okay.
I had asked Aiden what felt different in his body a few weeks ago that made him want to go to the doctors and get all these tests done. Because you remember, Aiden was the one who finally said, I want to have the bone marrow test done.
Yes.
And I think the doctors were saying it like, hey, well, we could do a bone marrow test. And he's like, yes, I want to have one done. Usually when you mention doctors to kids, they run the other way. Aiden said that during football practice, he would feel very tired and just different. One night he was alone. He gave himself a medical exam, checking his lymph nodes like a doctor would. So throughout his life, especially early on with the Bruton's disease, they would always do this.
Yeah, he knows
test.
that doctors do this.
Yep. So he was literally laying down and felt that maybe he could have cancer or something. So he did a self-exam to check his lymph nodes.
Now Carlos is at the hospital writing this on Carrying Bridge. I'm at home. So when I read that, I oh my gosh, just devastating.
It was hard to hear.
It's devastating.
Yeah, very hard to hear, especially in the moment. And to continue on, he knew something was very wrong with him. I asked him if he thought it was his appendix because, I had my appendix taken out very young, at a very young age. It kind of runs in my side of the family. And,
For young kids.
For
in your
very
family.
young kids. And we had talked about that, that, hey, do you think it was your appendix, or something else like cancer? And Aiden had said, I didn't rule out cancer. Like he was more focused on this, whatever was ailing him being cancer. I told Aiden that Mom and I talked about how sick he was, and we knew it was serious when he told Kim that he wanted to quit football because he missed so many practices. He has wanted to play football for a very long time, but medically was not allowed. I told Aiden that football helped us catch this early, and he should be thankful, because if he didn't go out for football and feel the way that he was feeling, when they did that spinal test, who knows if that cancer could have been in his spinal fluid or spinal cord.
Yeah, it's not that we wouldn't have caught it, but it's just how further into it would we have been, because he was really exerting himself during that.
And so, we had kind of set up the man cave, and over his bed, I had put his football jersey. So his football jersey is kind of hanging over his bed, and he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks back, and I'll continue. Aiden grabbed the Lakeside football jersey hanging over his bed and started to pull on it. I looked up at him, and he was crying. He turned to me while releasing the jersey from his hand and said, "Thanks, Dad, you made me cry." I told him...
I told him that it was okay to cry, even in the man cave. So we will let that sit with you, and we will meet you back here next time.
Damn. They got me.